Folks, I have a confession. I am a total 100% fraud and have never taught velocity banking. And do you know how I know this? Because my senpai says that I never did velocity banking. So basically, we had a back and forth conversation, and he says, the people you shared in your example are not asking for velocity banking as I define it. They're actually asking for help with their finances and defining it as velocity banking. So I've never done velocity banking in my life. Oh man, I'm a fraud. Oh, just using lines of credit as your main operating account. Oh man, segregation of income. All of this not velocity banking. Not at all. No. And the person who wrote the email doesn't know what they're talking about. You shouldn't have used the word velocity banking because we don't do it. We just help people with finances according to Learn and Grow Rich. They are asking helping with to help with their finances, so it's not velocity banking. I'm sorry. I'm a fraud. I never did it. Even though I have over 700 videos on the topic on this channel. I'm so sorry. I deceived you all. It was never velocity banking. It was never. Dang. Anyways, all right. So let me just kind of give you some context of what this is about. So I actually called out Senpai Learn and Grow Rich. Please notice me, Senpai. And he actually responded. He actually responded. So he said, commented on your post last night. I told you I'm willing to get on a call to discuss the examples you were sharing. Not sure if you got it. And, I just said, why don't we just discuss here? And basically, he says, I've explained everything in my work papers and have them independently verified by third-party financial experts. I don't know what more I can prove that I'm right other than you have personally review my work and tell me where I'm wrong. Where should I send you my work to review? And I said that my point was never about the math. I never disputed what he was saying, right? I'm saying that there is a use case where people can actually get helped. And I said, look, or actually, where's the example? I got this email here where someone actually had $4.10 left over in 22 debts and specifically wanted velocity banking help. We can't call it velocity banking anymore because state of Illinois went after the Kwok brothers. But my point is this, right? The ideas like segregation of income, using your line of credit as your main operating account, things like the cash flow index to kind of structure the debt payoff, right? Um, so I guess I'm a little confused because I'll just kind of go through one by one. And I said, like, listen, this was never about the math. He was just saying, well, let me show you my math. It's like I made a video, directed to you about like what was, I'll tell you what the question was. I said, hey, maybe there might actually be people who can be helped by the strategy. So if people are begging you for help like they did to me, right? Should I turn them away because you're saying the strategy is trash, right? And so, we just kind of went back and forth, and I said, I did watch the question to use this. And so now we're just kind of talking semantics. What is velocity banking? We can't analyze something until we define it. So apparently I don't know what it is, and this guy's the arbiter of the definition of velocity banking. So he's saying velocity banking and chunking are exactly the same thing, and I would argue that chunking is just a specific subset of an idea of velocity banking. Now, if you want to argue, yeah, chunking, is not the best idea because you could actually save more with just making extra payments. Go for it. I never argued that. In fact, I've always said on this channel, if you had a 0% loan and you use a line of credit for one day to pay that 0% loan, you've automatically overpaid, and it's just best to pay off 30 years if you don't want to pay any interest at all, right? So he's saying he keeps referring to the math in 24-page report, and I'm saying that I didn't even refer to that in my previous videos. I said my question, and I also said that nobody can really define what velocity banking is in its exact term because it's a marketing term invented by Renaud's for their version of accelerated debt payoff, right? So that is true too. So if the question is, are we applying to the wrong demographic? I would say it shouldn't be applied to any demographic because it's mathematically flawed. And so apparently, starting off with $4.10 and then using your line of credit as your main operating account is mathematically flawed. Okay, so and then he's just trying to argue semantics. I'm referring to velocity banking sold as a debt reduction chunking strategy, and I would say that there were, he took the same class as I did, and there were specific things mentioned as using your lines of credit as your main operating account, and also uh, not just chunking, right? Segregation of income, right? Because what's this idea right here of why we only have $4.10 left over because we segregated our income, right? It's, things like that. So he's focused on the chunking and saying, hey, this whole chunking thing is velocity banking, and all these other aspects that you talk about are not velocity banking. Even though I know he took the same Renata's classes as I did. Now, do I agree with everything that's taught in the Renata's classes? No, but I'm not going to throw the baby out of the bathwater because there's a lot of great ideas from that class, and he's just specifically focused on the chunking part, right? So you're asking me if it. I think it is a good idea to apply a broken strategy to different demographic, and I said, yes, because there are different use cases in which is a terrible application of the strategy. If you did watch the video, you would see an example with 22 deaths of $4 after asking for help. There's a clear use case of the strategy, which also prevents what it also prevents, which is segregation of income. My question was that is it the right thing to turn away for people who are clearly asking for help and did not get there because of velocity banking? And then he's just going on and on that there's no direct definition, and it's not what I define it as, and blah 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 blah, right? And I said, um, I said my question is, would you turn away the person asking for help because you're saying velocity banking is trash and doesn't help anybody? And I think he said somewhere that I'm putting words in his mouth. Let me just look for the Control F words. Yeah. So if and so you're avoiding my question. My question is, would you turn away the person asking for help because you're saying velocity banking trash doesn't help anybody? And if it is undefined, doesn't help, then is it the right thing to turn away the person asking for help? And I'm arguing that velocity banking is sold by people. The chunking strategy using the lines of credit is mathematically incorrect, as Sold explained. You're arguing and framing my argument as something I did not originally argue. Did you watch my video? To address your question, if you can help someone, the solution has integrity, and he thinks that it helps them, I think you should help them. This has nothing to do with velocity banking. Folks, apparently this is not velocity banking. Apparently it's not. I've made over 700 videos on topic. Apparently I don't know what it is. I don't. Lines of credit, main operating account, segregation of income, cash flow index, maybe some chunking at the end, right? I even use this calculator, but there's a certain context about why I use this calculator, right? So, but apparently what I'm saying, my argument is that he's saying that this person, let me just kind of go back here, who's asking for velocity banking help doesn't know what they're talking about. What I'm doing is not velocity banking. It's just helping people with their finances. And he's saying, I'm just trying to put words in his mouth that I did not say. And what am I missing? I'm looking, what answer are you looking for? I'm saying I'm giving you a real life use case where we apply the basic principles of strategy, such as using lines of credit as your main operating account. Using a cash flow index, determine debt payoff, preventing segregation of income. Velocity banking is not chunking. Your argument that this strategy is trash. So I'm asking, if the strategy is trash, should you turn away people for asking for help? And then we did apply velocity banking strategy because the person is asking for velocity banking help. And then I said, hey, if the strategy is trash and flawed strategy shouldn't be applied to different demographics, I'm asking a real life case where someone is asking for velocity banking help, and now you're saying it doesn't count because it has no real definition. Asking a question is not putting words in your mouth. I'm giving you my experience of people asking for help, and if we should turn away people who ask for the help because this flawed strategy with no real definition. And then basically he weaseled out and said that I'm not doing velocity banking, so you know he basically he's so committed to the idea that velocity banking has no usefulness to anybody that he's redefining what I do as not velocity banking and just helping people with their finances and defining that as velocity banking. Okay. And so I guess the last question I asked him was like, so are you saying that what I covered is not velocity banking? And then let me reload this to see if there are any new comments here. Let me just see if he responded to this. He didn't respond to it. Okay. So apparently, according to my senpai, Senpai Learn and Grow Rich, I never did velocity banking, and I'm mistaken. People who email me don't know what they're talking about. Using lines of credit, apparently that's not what that's this is not velocity banking. It's kind of like Obi-Wan Kenobi. Like, these are not the droids you're looking for. This is not velocity banking. We can't say velocity banking. No, no, no. We can't say that. What must we call it? Actually, let me do a strike through. This is not velocity banking. This is helping people with finances. I think that's what he called it. Let me just kind of do this. So apparently this was never velocity banking. What I did, what I showed, asking people. Oh man, you know what is just. So basically, he's trying to weasel out of this by saying, like, by semantics, and saying I can't define it, even though I'm saying, hey, there might be a not exact definition because it's a marketing term invented by Renatus, but he's saying that this strategy has no trash, and velocity banking is 100% chunking, which is not true, because I know, because I took the same class as him, right? It was taught by Christian George, and then later on by Randall, but he probably doesn't have access to the Randall class because um, he got kicked out. They took away his education, Renatus education. But yeah, so Senpai Zach, here's the thing. Are you I'm waiting for the answer if what I covered is not velocity banking. It's been 33 minutes and you didn't answer me. So yeah, so apparently if you did not answer me, I'm just going to assume that you are saying I'm not doing velocity banking, which makes me come to the conclusion that I never did this and I just help people with their finances. And I was just totally mistaken. Lines of credit, main operating account, oh my goodness, dump all your paycheck in line of credit, take your expenses out. That was never velocity banking. It's just helping people with your finances, folks. Anyways, okay, well, have a great day, and I'll see you. I'm going to call out Senpai Zach again. Senpai Learn and Grow Rich, because it's clear that he didn't want to answer my question, so he had to reframe it and saying this is just a question of semantics and definition, and I never did velocity banking. Rather than just answering the question, hey, maybe there, or just implying that this strategy may have some usefulness. So if people are asking for help, do you turn them away? Which is a very hard question to answer, because if he has to answer yes, and that means that we kind of have to admit that we might be actually turning away people who can help. So, in order to stick to his argument that velocity banking is 100% bad, he has to define it only as chunking rather than the basic strategies and principles that were part of velocity banking and not just chunking. Now, in my opinion, if you say, hey, if you do extra payments versus chunking, you know, is chunking superior? I would say no. You there everything has a trade-off, right? Everything has a trade-off. Extra payments is a default option that nobody does. So that's how I frame it, right? So as an alternative, in order to pay off your mortgage and do it in a very easy manner without thinking too much, that's how I define it. You could just use chunking. And I demonstrate that, hey, even with the 8, 15, 30% line of credit, that as you up the interest rate more, you're going to pay a little bit more, but you prevent the segregation of income. Okay, but it's clear that he didn't want to define what I was doing as velocity banking. So I am going to, let's see, did he reply? No, he didn't reply. So basically saying, I am not looking, if you're looking to pick a fight, you're in the wrong place. I have no interest in arguing with you. I'm not arguing with it. I'm just asking basic questions. And now you're just trying to go, talk about semantics and definitions. And I'm just saying, hey, look, this velocity banking thing is a marketing term invented by Renatus about their version of accelerated debt payoff, but there's some basic principles that they talk about, which I apply to all this, not just chunking, right? But apparently we don't know what we're talking about. People who email me, they have no idea what this is. It's just helping people with their finances. In fact, going forward, I need to just go back in all my videos, and wherever I wrote velocity banking, I gotta do a replace, find and replace, and then just put, wherever I see velocity banking, just put helping people with their finances. Okay? All right. Well, good night, everybody. Maybe I might make another video because I had a lot of energy tonight. Have a great day, and I'll see you on the next video.